The Aprilia Tuareg 660 is a stunning adventure bike with a high level of performance. If you've been following this bike at all, you know that it has been winning some of the most challenging races over the past few years. I've identified 3 riders that I think should consider replacing their current bike with one of these to take their riding experience to a higher level and to take their riding skills up to a higher level. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. The Aprilia Tuareg 660 has slowly been separating itself from the other bikes in the middleweight adventure bike class through its high degree or high level of performance and also proving to be incredibly reliable. Now that can be seen in the races that it's been winning over the past few years, the eco races, but not only does this bike have a high level of performance, but it was very thoughtfully designed. A couple of the key things that demonstrate how well thought out this bike was is the ergonomics of this bike. This is the first bike I've ever owned that I haven't wanted to change something in the ergonomics. It's been perfect the way it is. And some of the finer details signifying that the engineers knew how adventure bikes were going to be used, like having a larger kickstand foot compared to a lot of the other bikes that are so incredibly small. This one has some substance to it. And then also a replaceable exhaust hanger. Those are just small details that are thought out on this bike. Now, as I had said before, I've identified 3 types of riders that I think will benefit the most from this bike and are likely at a point where they should start considering replacing their bike and putting this one at the top of their list. All right, the 3 types of riders that I think should be considering this bike are the riders that are on the small capacity adventure bikes, the riders that are on the really large capacity adventure bikes, and then also those riders that are maybe riding the KTM 790 or 890 adventures and are frustrated with warranty issues, and even the Tenere 700 owners that are tired of picking up those bikes. So I'll go through the details of each of those types of riders and why I think they will get the most, or you will get the most out of this bike. If you're riding a small capacity adventure bike and you want more, like more horsepower, more suspension travel, more comfort, just more overall from your riding experience, then this might be a way to go. Especially if you are one of those riders out there on the KTM 390 Adventure, maybe the Honda CRF 300L, or the Royal Enfield Himalayan 411, or maybe even the 450, or maybe even you dipped your toe into getting a CFMoto 450 and you're hitting some limitations on any of these bikes. If that's the case and you feel like your riding skills have really jumped up, it might be time for you to upgrade, and this should be on your list, maybe even a top priority bike to get a test ride on. If you're riding a small capacity bike, it likely is going to be limiting you in suspension travel, and then that horsepower, even in the mid 40s, it still isn't going to be the greatest if you're wanting to do some passing and you're doing long distance travel. So what you're going to get from this bike is 80 horsepower, so almost double the horsepower out of that, or way more than that if you're on the other bikes. So when you're doing the road riding, you'll feel a lot more confident in there and you can do passing a lot easier. The other thing, off-road, it's fun to have a few extra horsepower, break the rear tire loose, climb up some really challenging terrain. And as your skills go up, you're just naturally gonna ride faster. The other thing is you're gonna get more suspension travel, which is fantastic. That also means more ground clearance, so you can start riding more challenging terrain. You get better electronics package than all of those bikes too. So really, this is a huge step up. So if you find yourself getting bored with your small capacity bike, or you feel like that bike is limiting your riding ability or your skills and you're ready to go to the next level, this bike is a great choice. I hear all the time how older riders that are on the big adventure bikes, the BMW R1200, 1250, or even now the 1300GS or the KTM 1290, now it's going to be a 1390, or even the Triumph Tiger 1200, which I think has also gone to a 1300. Those bikes are big and heavy, and I've talked to many older riders that just feel like that bike is getting to be too much off-road, and they want to step down to a small capacity adventure bike and start riding there. But I want to caution you from doing that, because if you are riding a 120 some horsepower bike and you cut the horsepower in third, even dropping all that weight, you may be disappointed with how that bike performs on the road, getting to the places you want to ride. And then maybe even when you're riding off-road, it might not be exactly what you were looking for. What I have seen with the older riders hitting that age where they just don't have the same amount of strength, but they still have an incredible amount of skills. Before you go to the small bike, consider going to a middleweight adventure bike like this bike, so that you have some of the things that you loved about your big bike: a great electronics suite, good ergonomics, good for highway riding, but not nearly as heavy. You're saving 100 to 150 pounds getting off-road, so you can still manage it. That might be a better choice. Now, I also see riders that, like myself, who was riding a BMW R1200GS, and I felt for me that bike was limiting my off-road riding because it was heavy and the suspension just wasn't holding up to the speeds that I was starting to increase into. So if you are one of those riders as well, riding one of those big adventure bikes, and you feel like that bike is limiting you and what you can do, and you don't want to damage your $20,000 bike off-road, pushing the limits of what you can do and what the bike can do, well, before going to a small capacity, this is also a great option. What I have loved about this bike is it feels to me, ergonomics wise, the same as my BMW did, but maybe just a little bit more compact. And it has a great electronics suite. I've got cruise control, I've got ride modes, I've got tubeless tires, which I absolutely love, the tubeless wheel set, and then a suspension that I can tune myself. Now, I've already sent the forks in to get those revalved and resprung for my weight, but those are things that I can do without spending a fortune like you have to on those bigger bikes. So I really think if you're on a bigger bike, before you drop down to a lower, small capacity bike, consider getting a middleweight. More importantly, consider getting this bike. All right, the third kind of rider that should consider replacing their current bike with this is the rider who already is riding a middleweight adventure bike and is completely frustrated with it. And I'm more specifically talking to you to begin with, KTM owners with the 790 or 890 Adventures. Now, I know that this bike isn't going to live up to the Adventure R as far as performance goes, but as of right now, I don't know that any other bikes are having more issues than those 790s and 890s, especially with the cam issues that have came out. Now, if you're lucky enough that you've had no issues with your cams, good for you, but I also know there's quite a few frustrated riders. So in your search to try to replace your 790 or 890 because of the warranty issues or your concerns of what's happening to KTM as a company, well, this is a great replacement option for those bikes. You're gonna lose a little bit of horsepower, but the performance is still here. And you can do so much with this bike. It should be an easy transition. Weight-wise, it's even a little bit lighter. So that should be one of the things that you consider. Now, the other middleweight adventure riders that I want to talk to are the Tenere 700 riders that are tired of picking up their bikes. I have gotten lots of comments from riders who got tired of those bikes because they were having to pick them up all the time, partly with that top heaviness to it, and that bike seems to flop over a lot. So if you are one of those riders that are just fed up with riding that bike, or you have it in your mind that that's what adventure riding is going to be like because of what that bike is like to ride, well, give this bike a try, because I promise you it will change your riding experience. The difference between the Tenere 700 and this bike is night and day. So if you are a frustrated KTM 790 or 890 owner, or a Tenere 700 owner, give this bike a try. You won't regret it. I know some of you are going to mention in the comments that you don't have a dealership that's local to you, and I have a couple thoughts on that. One is just how far away is your closest dealership, and then two is what do you expect to do at the dealership after point of purchase? Now, there's always a possibility of warranty issues, but this bike is proving to be incredibly reliable. And if you're going to be needing to take it in for service, which services? Are you going to take it in for every oil service, or maybe just the major valve adjustment service? And then also consider how many miles are you going to be riding this every year? Are you going to be riding 10 to 15,000 miles every year where you're going to need that major service once a year? Or are you more like an average rider doing 4,000, 5,000 miles where a major service is every 2 to 3 years? So those are some things to think about. And then I also know one of the other things that comes up all the time is the availability of parts for this bike. If you don't have a dealership that's nearby, this day and age, you can get about everything you want online. You don't need to go to a dealership if you're comfortable doing the work yourself. And it really doesn't matter what brand you have. If you have a major issue that comes up, they're gonna have to order in the parts anyway. So just my thoughts on having a local dealership. I do have a local one, but now that I know what I do know from this bike, I'd have no problems if it was 4, 5, 6 hours away. I'd just find something else to do for a couple days while I took it in and had it dropped off, or I'd make the drive because the riding experience is so amazing. Those are the three types of riders that I really think should be considering this bike, the Aprilia Tuareg 660. Now, if you've made it this far and you notice that I haven't really talked about the bike itself in full detail, well, I'm gonna leave a link in the description below for the review I did on this bike at the 10,000 mile mark. And I have a whole playlist dedicated to this bike that I'll also, if I figure out how to leave a link to a playlist, I'll put that in there. So if you want to know more about my experience with this bike, you can go there and see it. Now, remember, you can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. So get out and do that ride you've been thinking about. Get out and test ride bikes like this to see if maybe this is a good replacement for whatever bike you're riding now. Thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there. This is...